Whilst it is acknowledged that the Satanic Panic began at the turn of the decade from the 1970s into the 1980s, around the time the book Michelle Remembers was published, and popular culture such as heavy metal music and horror films became the focus of parents' disdain throughout the world, it may have in fact started before that.
Ritualistic Podcast, Season 2, The Satanic Panic.
666. That's worship of the devil.
They use blood in their ritual.
Walpurgis Night, April 30th, 1966. A group gathered at the Black House, 6114 California Street, San Francisco, California, for what would be the official founding of the Church of Satan. Anton Sandor LaVey had been conducting regular lectures and workshops on subjects including the occult, witchcraft, and aspects of Satanism in the house since 1956, and in the early 1960s formed the Order of the Trapezoid, an eclectic group of like-minded individuals that would later become the governing body of the Church of Satan. In 1966, known as Anno Satanas, or the first year by the Church of Satan, would be the start of rapid growth for the church, with grottos being formed in Detroit, Michigan, Dayton, Ohio, and New York City, and a number of high-profile members reportedly joining, such as renowned entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. Over the coming years, the Satanic Church would see a rise in membership following news articles and publicity after LaVey published the Satanic Bible, and in 1973 subsequent fracturing of the church, when a number of leaders from Michigan, Ohio, and Florida split and formed the short-lived Church of Satanic Brotherhood. The Church of Satan does not believe in a literal Satan, and do not worship Satan as a deity, but rather uses Satan as a figurehead and representation of the adversary, and the freedom of oneself to make their own choices and live life the way they want to. Members of the Church of Satan live by the central convictions that consist of 9 satanic statements, 11 satanic rituals of the earth, 9 satanic sins, and pentagonal revisionism. We will explore Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan further in future episodes. The murders committed by the members of the Manson family contributed to the end of the free love era of the 1960s and shattered the sense of security many had in their own homes. Charles Manson was interviewed by Geraldo Rivera for his primetime Satanism special in 1988, where Rivera introduced Charles Manson to millions of viewers as, quote, today's top satanic celebrity, end quote, and claimed that the Manson family murders were satanic. In reality, the Manson family cult was not satanic. The only real links that Manson family had to Satanism was Susan Atkins, who had worked for Anton LaVey briefly as a dancer named Sexy Sadie in a production called The Witch's Sabbath, and had visited the Black House for some rituals before joining the family. The second tenuous link was Bobby Beausoleil, who was hired by and lived with filmmaker Kenneth Anger, who was a friend of LaVey, to work on the soundtrack and star in the film Lucifer Rising. The film would later be recut to include LaVey, and in 1969 the film was completed and retitled Invocation of My Demon Brother. After a falling out with Anger, Beausoleil lived with music teacher Gary Hinman for a while in his house in Topanga Canyon that Hinman would open up to people who had nowhere to live. Manson, under the impression that Hinman was wealthy, sent Beausoleil, Mary Brunner, and Susan Atkins to convince him to join the Manson family and turn over his assets to Charles Manson. But things took a turn when Gary Hinman would not join the family, and the members held him hostage for 3 days before, under the instruction of Charles Manson, Bobby Beausoleil stabbed Gary Hinman to death and scrawled "Political Piggy" and drew a panther paw on the wall, both in Hinman's blood. The rise of hard rock and heavy metal in the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s contributed to the growing panic of the moral decline of society, with bands often including anti-authoritarian and anti-war themes such as War Pigs, from Black Sabbath's 1970 album Paranoid, and darker themes such as Paranoid from the same album, and lusty lyrics such as the song Love Gun from Kiss's 1977 album of the same name. Many heavy rock and metal bands use occult and satanic imagery for shock value and to appeal to rebellious teens aesthetically as well as musically. Led Zeppelin have been involved in the occult, especially Jimmy Page, the band's guitarist, who owns Boleskine House, the former Scottish residence of occult figure Aleister Crowley, and also associated with Kenneth Anger, whom he allowed to use his London home to work on Lucifer Rising. The band also used occult-like symbols for each member, with 3 of them taken from the Book of Signs by Rudolph Koch, with singer Robert Plant using the Feather of Ma'at inside a circle, drummer John Bonham using the 3 interlock circles, bass guitarist John Paul Jones' symbol is the Triquetera, which is a circle with 3 intersecting Visacia pieces, and finally guitarist Jimmy Page's symbol is the stylized word so-so. In 1975, Jimmy Page and Kenneth Anger had a falling out, with Anger trash talking Page in the media, and reportedly resulting in Anger cursing Page and the band. In the coming years, the band would have some bad luck befall them. On August 4th, 1975, Robert Plant and his family were holidaying on the Greek island of Rhodes when Plant lost control of their rental car, which then spun and careened off a cliff. When the car came to rest, Robert had a broken ankle and elbow. His wife Maureen was also injured, but luckily their children escaped injury. Following that, Led Zeppelin were forced to postpone their physical graffiti tour and postpone the recording of the follow-up album Presence. When they took to the replacement tour, Plant came down with laryngitis after the band's instruments had already been shipped to the United States, and the band was subsequently unable to rehearse for a month. Once in the USA, the tour began, but in April 1977, in Cincinnati, a group of ticketless fans rioted and attempted to force entry to the Riverfront Coliseum where the band was playing. In June 1977, the band had to abandon a concert in Tampa midway through as the heavens opened and the rain was too heavy to continue. Fans again rioted. And in July 1977, at the Oakland stop of the tour, John Bonham, along with manager Peter Grant and a group of other men, came to blows with tour promoter Bill Graham and his staff. At the next stop of the tour in New Orleans, Robert Plant received news that his 5-year-old son, that he absolutely adored, Karak, was sick, and in a second phone call, his wife Maureen broke the news that Karak had sadly passed away. Plant immediately flew from New Orleans back to the family farm near Kidderminster in England to be with his family, and the band cancelled the remaining 10 dates in New Orleans, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Philadelphia. Following his son's death, Plant seriously looked at dropping out of the band and working locally teaching to support his family. Tensions were escalating between band members when Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones did not attend Karak's funeral, which was seen as a rift within the band as Bonham had been close by to comfort Plant in his dark days. Ultimately, the band did return, and in their next album, In Through the Outdoor, Plant penned All My Love for his son. This would not be the end of tragedy for the band. On September 24th, 1980, the band, having toured Europe, was staying at Jimmy Page's house in preparation for the upcoming tour of the United States. The band's drummer John Bonham had begun drinking early in the day and was heavily inebriated during the remainder of the day and through the night, even during rehearsals, before being helped to bed by his assistant Rex King and Page's assistant Albert Hobbs before passing out in bed. The following morning, September 25th, the band's tour manager Ben Lefebvre attempted to wake Bonham. When he wouldn't stir and he couldn't find a pulse, he knew something was terribly wrong and called an ambulance. But Bonham had died and the band was over. Bonham's death was ruled accidental by the coroner. Pathologist Dr. Edmund Hempstead reportedly said this indicated he inhaled the vomit and did not die immediately as a result of that, and that he died some hours later due to the shock state on inhaling vomit. The occult roots of the bands was deep, but was the band's run of terrible luck because of a curse by occultist Kenneth Anger, or just really shitty luck? We don't really know, but the band's legend helped stoke the interest of many music lovers and helped stoke the fires during the Satanic Panic, when a supposed hidden message was discovered in the band's hit Stairway to Heaven that is believed to say, "Here's to my sweet Satan," and "There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer, sad Satan."
En alle moet morgen, ik weet dat
We will cover the topic of backmasking in depth later in the season. All of the above, combined with other bands, meant that hard rock and heavy metal music copped the wrath of various Christian groups, and parents who often banned children from listening to these bands or attending their concerts, believing that they were spreading dangerous and devilish messages. Later in the series, we'll cover some specific cases where heavy metal was directly blamed for 2 suicides and a murder, and also the movement led by Tipper Gore to save the world from music. Horror movies have long had a knack for scaring us senseless, but with time comes advances in realism and new themes to explore. One movie that explored an untouched theme was 1968's Rosemary's Baby. This is a movie that is fantastically made and based on a 1967 book of the same name by Ira Levin. The story explores a number of themes, including what is known as gaslighting, misogyny, and even consent. Rosemary is a fairly submissive housewife. Her husband Guy is a self-centered actor who makes a deal with the devil via the coven of witches in their apartment block to impregnate Rosemary with the Antichrist in return for a successful career. One night, Guy and their neighbour Minnie drug Rosemary in order to perform their ritual to summon the devil and impregnate Rosemary. As Rosemary goes through her pregnancy, she is constantly being gaslit by Guy, friends, even her doctor. When she starts looking into some books on witchcraft, she realizes that her neighbors and even their doctor are part of a coven. She doesn't really know what this means until she ultimately gives birth and the baby is taken from her. In the final scene, she stumbles upon the coven and they reveal to her that the child is the son of the devil, that they want her to stay and look after him, even if she doesn't join the coven.
You're Stephen Marcato, all right. Poor old geezer with a crazy father like that. No wonder he switched his name around.
You don't think he's the same?
What do you mean, a witch? Ro, are you kidding? Oh, Ro, honey.
His father was a martyr to it. You know how he died?
Honey, it's 1966.
This was published in 1933. There were covens in Europe. That's what they're called. The congregation. Covens in Europe, in America, and in Australia, and they have one right here. That whole bunch. The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting, those are espas or Sabbaths or
Honey,
whatever
don't get
they're called.
excited, huh?
Read what they do, Guy. They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the most power is baby's blood. And they don't just use the blood, they use the flesh, too.
Rosemary, for God's sakes.
They're not setting foot in this apartment ever again. And they're not coming within 50 feet of the baby.
They're old people. They have a bunch of old friends. Dr. Shan happens to play the recorder.
We're not taking any chances with the baby's safety. We're going to sublet and move out.
We are not.
Oh, yes, we
Now,
are.
we'll talk about it later.
In my opinion, these movies, along with others such as The Devil Rides Out and The Blood on Satan's Claw, combined with real-life happenings of the time such as the Manson family murders, helped to put the idea into the public's mind that there were satanic cults who performed rituals, and began to ramp up the paranoia within some areas of society, especially those with strong Christian beliefs and fears. This Christian fear would further be stoked in 1973 with the release of The Exorcist, written by William Peter Blatty, directed by Billy Friedkin, and starring the young talent of Linda Blair as Reagan, the possessed teenager. While The Exorcist doesn't contain a cult of devil worshippers, it does explore the use of Ouija boards as a conduit of the supernatural and the demons. The Ouija board was a toy, first patented in the 1890s by businessman Elijah Bond as a talking board, set out with letters of the alphabet and numbers 0 through 9, the words yes, no, and goodbye. It wasn't until mid-World War I, around 1915, that the board became known as a tool for contacting the other side, when spiritualist Pearl Curran began to use it as a divining tool. After this, the use of the Ouija board to contact the dead became more common, mainly among spiritualists and occult dabblers, then later among teenagers out to scare themselves silly. The Ouija board would later go on to become a big seller for Parker Brothers, although nowadays there are many spirit board manufacturers, and their popularity among teens and occult enthusiasts remains fairly high. The Exorcist shows Regan McNeil playing with the Ouija board and inadvertently summoning the demon Pazuzu. Later on, Regan starts to show worrying signs of possession, and after seeing numerous doctors and psychologists, her actress mother Chris consults father Damien Karras and begs him to exorcise Regan. This movie contains themes and scenes that the public had rarely, if ever, seen before in a theatrical release. The movie was particularly disturbing because of the fantastic makeup and wild themes involved in some scenes, including one scene where the teenager Regan is depicted masturbating with a crucifix. Another notable, more mainstream movie was 1976's The Omen, starring Gregory Peck as Robert Thorne, Lee Remick as Catherine Thorne, and Harvey Stephens as Davian Thorne. In the movie, Robert Thorne, an American ambassador to Great Britain, is warned about Damien by a priest that believes Damien is the Antichrist. And when people start dying, including his nanny and his mother, Thorne begins to believe it and uncovers the strange birthmark, which appears to be the number 666. He then travels to Rome, where with the help of Jennings, a photographer, he searches the graveyard, where he finds that he believes to be his child, who was switched at birth with Damien. He is then set upon by hellhounds who try to rip him to shreds. The movie closes with Book of Revelations chapter 13 verse 18, which ominously reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The movie plays with many themes, among which are biblical prophecy, creepy children, and hidden evil cults. These movies are among the more well-known horror-themed movies that were released prior to the Satanic Panic era that contributed to the ratcheting up of fear surrounding the devil and devil worship in society that helped contribute to the moral panic of the 1980s. As you can see, popular culture has a massive part to play in the Satanic Panic. When fictional themes that are found in books and movies meets the reality of cults, such as the Manson family, it is easy to see how the public fear could be stoked. The public fear of hidden cults of Satan worshippers and human sacrifice only grew with the number of books that became popular, including non-fiction bestseller Michelle Remembers, written by Canadian psychiatrist Lawrence Pazder and his patient Michelle Smith, about her recovered memories of ritual abuse by a satanic cult. This, among other books, will be the focus of our next episode. Thank you for listening, and for following us on social media, at RitualisticP on Twitter, at RitualisticPod on Instagram, or by searching for Ritualistic Podcasts on Facebook. If you wish to provide constructive feedback, feel free to email us on ritualisticpod@gmail.com. If you wish to contribute to the podcast, you can do so by joining our Patreon, where you will get perks such as exclusive episodes, shoutouts, and merchandise. Just visit www.patreon.com/ritualisticpod. You can also make a one-off contribution to our research fund. That helps us purchase books and other research materials. You can do so by sending it through www.ko-fi.com/ritualisticpodcast. You can find out more by visiting our website www.ritualisticpod.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or any of your favourite podcatchers so that you don't miss what's coming next. And as always, stay safe, stay awesome, and see you next time.